The Universal Aptitude Assessment had seemed like such a reasonable idea when the Interstellar Confederation proposed it 17 cycles ago. After all, what better way to measure a species' worthiness for advanced space exploration privileges than testing their ability to survive without technology? Strip away the plasma rifles, the neural implants, the graviton manipulators, and see what remains. Pure, unfiltered capability. The kind of raw talent that separated the genuinely adaptable from those who'd simply inherited their ancestors' achievements and coasted on autopilot ever since. 47 star systems had agreed to participate. 47 species would send their candidates to uninhabited worlds, equipped with nothing except their natural biology, and prove they still possessed the fundamental spark that had dragged their ancestors from caves to cosmos. It was romantic, really. Poetic. A return to roots, a celebration of primal excellence, a chance for modern spacefaring civilizations to demonstrate they hadn't gone completely soft behind their climate-controlled biodomes and synthesized nutrition pods. The testing administrators should have known better. They really, truly should have known better. The monitoring station orbiting Kerios 9 hummed with quiet efficiency, its observation arrays tracking every contestant across the planet's surface below. The staff manning the facility had witnessed dozens of these assessments. They'd seen the Vrexians pass with almost insulting ease, their crystalline exoskeletons and ability to photosynthesize making the whole affair rather anticlimactic. They'd watched Quilnari candidates leverage their telepathic abilities to coordinate hunting strategies with the planet's fauna, which was creative if somewhat against the spirit of the exercise. The Thalorians, bless their four-armed toxin-resistant hearts, had treated the entire thing like an extended vacation, lounging near water sources and occasionally snacking on whatever wandered too close. All perfectly reasonable outcomes, all thoroughly documented, all completely failing to prepare anyone for what was about to happen. Senior observer Kelthos, a Vraxi with 17 years of assessment experience, settled into his monitoring station with what could only be described as academic boredom. Another rotation, another contestant, another predictable demonstration of basic survival instincts. The newest arrival had just been deposited on Kerios 9's temperate zone, a human, according to the manifest. Species classification, Type 5 bilateral biped. Homeworld, Sol 3, colloquially known as Earth in their charmingly provincial language. Kelthos pulled up the biological profile and immediately felt sympathy for the creature. No natural weapons, no protective plating, no venom sacs, no camouflage capabilities, no enhanced sensory organs worth mentioning. Their temperature regulation system required constant external management. They couldn't even synthesize their own vitamin C, for crying out loud. What kind of evolutionary development path produces a species that can't manufacture its own basic nutrients? 10 credits, says he doesn't make it past day 3, announced junior observer Praxis from the adjacent station, her antenna twitching with amusement. I'll take that action, Kelthos replied, feeling generous. These primates are surprisingly resilient. I give him 5 days before extraction. They pulled up the visual feed. The human, Marcus Reeve, according to his registration, had just materialized on the planet's surface courtesy of the transport beam. He stood approximately 1.8 meters tall, with the typical bilateral symmetry his species favored. Brown head fur, medium build, wearing the standard assessment garment that would biodegrade within hours. He looked around, taking in his surroundings with an expression that Kelthos's translation software couldn't quite pass. Was that irritation? Boredom? Determination? Whatever it was, it certainly wasn't panic. The human spent approximately 30 seconds surveying the area, a forest clearing near a stream, temperate climate, abundant resources for those clever enough to exploit them. Then, instead of doing any of the logical first survival tasks, like seeking shelter or locating water or establishing a safe perimeter, Marcus Reeve walked directly to a rocky outcropping and started examining stones. "Peculiar," Kelthos muttered. "Perhaps he's disoriented from the transport." But no, the human was deliberately selecting specific rocks, weighing them in his hands, testing their edges against other stones. He rejected several before finding one that apparently met whatever criteria existed in his strange primate brain. Then he found another rock, this one heavier, and sat down cross-legged on the ground, and proceeded to smash the rocks together. Praxis said eloquently. What is he doing?" Kelthos checked the bio-readings. No signs of transport psychosis. Neural activity normal for the species. The human appeared to be operating with full cognitive function, which made his behavior even more baffling. He was deliberately striking one stone against another at specific angles, creating sharp flakes that scattered around him like synthetic debris. It took Kelthos another 3 minutes to understand what he was witnessing. "Oh no," he whispered. "What?" Praxis leaned closer to her monitor. "He's making something." "Making what?" "There's nothing there except rocks," and she stopped. On screen, the human held up his creation, a piece of stone with a deliberately crafted sharp edge, fitted into his grip with a precision that spoke of intentional design. "That wasn't there before." "No," Kelthos agreed, his bioluminescent patches flickering with concern. "It wasn't." The human tested his new implement. Calling it a tool seemed too generous, yet too accurate, against a fallen branch. The sharpened stone cut through wood fiber with ease. Marcus nodded, apparently satisfied, and immediately began making another one. "Is this legal?" Praxis demanded, pulling up the assessment regulations on her secondary screen. The rules specifically state no tools, no technology, no brought tools. Kelthos corrected, reading over her shoulder. Nothing about creating implements from available materials. It never occurred to anyone that a species would. He gestured helplessly at the screen, where the human had now produced 3 separate cutting implements of varying sizes and was using them to harvest specific types of wood. "Why didn't it occur to anyone?" Praxis asked. "It seems obvious now that you just make what you need." "Because," Kelthos said slowly, "most species either have natural capabilities that obviate tools, or they've been civilized so long they've forgotten their ancestors ever needed them. The Vrexians have built-in cutting surfaces. The Quilnari coordinate mentally with local fauna. The Tholarians can simply overpower most obstacles. When was the last time any of them needed to create a basic implement?" On screen, Marcus had graduated from stone tools to using those tools to create better tools. He'd fashioned a basic hand axe by hafting a sharp rock to a wooden handle using plant fiber he'd stripped and braided with disturbing efficiency. The whole process had taken less than an hour. By nightfall, the human had a shelter. Not a cave he'd found, not a convenient hollow in a tree. A deliberately constructed shelter made from branches, leaves, and woven grass, positioned near the stream with clear sightlines in multiple directions. The entrance faced away from prevailing winds. A small trench surrounded the structure for water drainage. And because apparently the universe had a sense of humor, smoke was rising from a small fire pit the human had constructed. Fire. The human had made fire. "Query the central database," Kelthos shouted, abandoning all professional composure. Find me the last recorded instance of a contestant creating combustion during assessment. The computer thought for exactly 2 seconds. No records found matching specified criteria. Praxis stared at the screen, her antenna lying flat against her head in disbelief. How did he even... What did he... Fire requires friction or percussion ignition using prepared tinder materials. Kelthos read from the human species file, which he should have examined more carefully before. Common technique on homeworld. Used for approximately 400,000 local years before development of advanced technology. 400,000. Praxis couldn't finish the sentence. Most species discovered fire and moved past it within a few thousand years. These humans had been playing with combustion for 500,000 years and apparently never got bored of it. On screen, Marcus was cooking something over his fire. Fish, from the looks of it, caught using a spear he'd crafted from a straight branch and sharpened stone point. The human ate his meal, tended his fire, and then, because of course he did, used a burning branch to create a torch before entering his shelter for the night. "I need to report this," Kelthos said. "Report what? That he's successfully surviving. That's literally the point of the assessment." "No, I need to report that the assessment parameters may be insufficient for properly evaluating this species." He filed the report. His superiors ignored it. Humans were a backwater species from an unremarkable star system. How much trouble could one primitive primate cause? Day 2 answered that question. Marcus woke at dawn, tended his fire, which he'd apparently kept smoldering all night, using some technique involving buried coals and strategic wood placement, and immediately began expanding operations. He created a fishing trap using woven branches, placed it in the stream, and had a reliable food source established before the station's breakfast shift arrived. Then he made containers, multiple containers, woven baskets from plant materials, bark containers for water storage, even a primitive clay pot that he fired using his campfire. "He's only supposed to survive," Praxis muttered, watching the human establish what could only be described as infrastructure. Not renovate. By day 3, Marcus had a smoking rack for preserving fish. By day 4, he'd established a tanning frame and was processing animal hides using a mixture of brain matter and plant tannins. Where he'd learned that particular technique, Kelthos didn't want to know. The human's knowledge base seemed bottomless. Perhaps his species has genetic memory, Praxis suggested desperately, trying to rationalize what they were witnessing. "No, they have something worse," Kelthos replied, reading deeper into the human file. "Apparently, they've been writing down survival techniques for millennia and teaching them recreationally. For fun, they practice primitive skills as a hobby. Why would anyone? Because they're humans," Kelthos said, as if that explained anything. Perhaps it did. Day 5 brought the observers' first genuine crisis. Marcus encountered the native fauna, small quadrupedal creatures with limited intelligence but highly social behavior. Any reasonable species would either avoid them or hunt them for food. Marcus started feeding them. "No," Kelthos said firmly to his screen, as if the human could hear him. "Absolutely not. Don't you dare." Too late. The human had already begun a systematic campaign of befriending the local wildlife using gifts of food, patient interaction, and what appeared to be rudimentary communication attempts. Within 2 days he had a following. Within 4 days he'd established what could only be described as a working relationship with approximately 15 individual creatures who brought him food, alerted him to larger predators, and appeared to genuinely enjoy his company. "He's domesticating them," Praxis said flatly. In less than a week, he's recreating his species' entire evolutionary development arc. Please stop, Kelthos whispered to the screen. You've proven your point. You can survive. Just maintain until extraction. Don't. Marcus expanded the shelter to accommodate his new companions. Why? Praxis demanded of the universe at large. Why does he need roommates? The assessment is individual. But Marcus apparently didn't believe in individual anything. He established a food-sharing system. He created separate sleeping areas. He even made toys, actual recreational objects, for the younger creatures. Within 3 days of contact, he'd transformed a survival situation into a functional society with division of labor, communal resources, and what appeared to be an elected hierarchy among the creatures themselves. The emergency committee meeting convened on day 8. We need to discuss the human situation. Administrator Velcro began, her fur standing on end from stress. What situation? Demanded council member Jorax, who hadn't been watching the feeds. Is the subject in distress, requiring early extraction? No, Kelthos said carefully. He's thriving. Excessively. They pulled up the current feed. Marcus had constructed a workshop area separate from his living shelter. He'd established a primitive irrigation system for a patch of edible plants he'd identified and transplanted. His tool collection now numbered over 30 individual implements, each crafted for specific purposes. The native creatures maintained a patrol rotation around the settlement, and yes, it was definitely a settlement now, bringing news of resources and potential threats. By day 9, Marcus had created art, actual decorative cave paintings using mineral pigments, depicting his journey on the planet. For morale, Kelthos explained weakly when questioned. Apparently humans require aesthetic stimulation for psychological health. He's been here 9 days, Jorax said slowly. And he's concerned about morale. Day 10, extraction day, arrived with a sense of relief among the observation staff. Finally, this would end. They'd retrieve the human, file their reports, and recommend extensive rule modifications for future assessments. Perhaps something along the lines of species capable of rapid technological bootstrap are prohibited, or no humans ever, under any circumstances. The retrieval team materialized in the settlement because calling it a campsite felt dishonest, expecting to find an exhausted survivor grateful for rescue. Instead, they found Marcus teaching 3 of the native creatures how to weave baskets. "Oh, hey," the human said, looking up with mild surprise. "Is it time already? This is day 10? The team leader, a Thalorian named Crexus, stared at the thriving micro-civilization surrounding them. "Yes, it's time," Marcus sighed, setting down his half-finished basket. He turned to the nearest creature, the largest one, who appeared to be some kind of leader, and made a series of gestures. The creature responded with vocalizations that almost sounded like language. "You've established communication," Crexus said, because apparently this day could still get weirder. "Basic stuff." Marcus shrugged. "Mostly about food and danger. They're smart, just needed someone to take the time." He gathered his few personal items, all of which he'd made, and turned back to the creatures. More gestures, more vocalizations. If Crexus didn't know better, he'd swear the human was making promises. "Are you saying goodbye?" Crexus asked. "And promising to return if possible," Marcus confirmed. "I mean, they helped me out. Feels wrong to just abandon them. Please don't return," Crexus muttered too quietly for the human to hear. The evaluation committee convened in the station's main conference chamber, facing a problem none of them had anticipated. What exactly do you do when a contestant doesn't just pass the assessment, but comprehensively demonstrates capabilities that make the entire testing framework look inadequate? Marcus's biological readings showed him healthier at extraction than at insertion. He'd gained muscle mass. His stress markers were lower than baseline. By every measurable metric, the human had treated a survival assessment as a relaxing vacation. Technical pass, Administrator Velcro announced finally. But I'm flagging this for council review. We need new protocols. Agreed, Kelthos added. Recommend adding regulations regarding tool creation, domestication attempts, and he consulted his notes, infrastructure development during assessment periods. The final report required 147 new rules, all essentially variations of please don't do what the human did. Marcus, for his part, sat in the debriefing room looking mildly confused by the fuss. The test said survive with bare hands, he pointed out when questioned about his approach. I used my bare hands to make tools, which I then used to make better tools, which I used to make shelter and fire, and everything else. That's just how humans do things. Always has been. But why? Praxis asked, genuine curiosity overriding professional protocol. Why not simply endure the 10 days? Why build so extensively? Marcus considered the question. Because I could. Because it's easier to thrive than barely survive. Because doing things properly means you're not just existing, you're living. Plus, honestly, this was way more relaxing than camping with my extended family. At least here nobody argued about the best way to start a fire. The comment was included in the official report. It sparked a 3-hour debate among xenopsychologists about human standards for relaxation. Within a week, Marcus's assessment results had circulated through every major diplomatic channel in the Confederation. Other species demanded rule changes. Some claimed the test had been culturally biased toward tool-using species, despite everyone technically being tool-using species. They'd just forgotten how to create tools without technology. That was the part that unsettled everyone most. Humans hadn't forgotten. They'd spent 500,000 years practicing, refining, teaching, and playing with survival skills. They'd built civilization on top of their primitive capabilities without ever letting those capabilities atrophy. They could design starships, and still knew how to start a fire with sticks. 3 diplomatic incidents and 1 minor trade dispute later, the Interstellar Confederation quietly updated its assessment policies. Humans were granted full exploration privileges, not because they'd passed the test, but because everyone suddenly realized that a species capable of building a functional society in 10 days, with nothing but rocks and determination, probably didn't need permission for anything. In his final interview, Marcus was asked what he'd learned from the experience. That survival isn't about having advantages, he said thoughtfully. It's about using whatever you have, working with who's around you, and remembering that every problem is just a project you haven't started yet. Also, that alien bureaucrats really need to spend more time camping. The interviewer declined to include that last comment in the official record. Kelthos, filing his final report, included one personal observation that his superiors would later cite in classified strategic briefings. Most civilized species view primitive capabilities as evolutionary history, something their ancestors did before becoming advanced. Humans view these same capabilities as foundational skills that civilization is built upon, not instead of. They never stopped being survivors. They just got dramatically better at it. His supervisor added a single note to the file: recommend monitoring human colonization efforts closely. If they can build a society in 10 days on an assessment planet, what will they accomplish with actual resources and time? Nobody wanted to find out, but everyone suspected they eventually would. Marcus returned to Earth with a passing grade, 17 job offers from various alien corporations, and one very annoyed message from the assessment committee asking him to please never volunteer for testing again. He framed the message above his fireplace, which he'd built himself naturally using traditional techniques. Because some things never change. And for humans, that was exactly the point.